Alright, this is going to be a response video to YouTube user DKM. They commented on the video I made about the Pink Floyd album rankings with some questions that they wanted me to give my take on, and I basically told them, I'm going to do a video about that because that's too much for me to type. So, this is that video. So they've got, 5 or 6 questions that I'm going to talk about. And obviously, preface this, these are my opinions. This is not fact. This is not the reason. This is not the truth. This is what I think. So, his first question, or her, I don't know. Their first question for me is, was Sid not just an original member and a clever singer-songwriter, a man and his guitar? Could he do without the other band members at the time to make Pink Floyd big himself? So, I guess first off, are we talking about it's Sid Barrett, but with 3 or 4 other people that aren't Roger, Nick, Rick, and then Dave later on, David? Or are we talking about just Sid by himself completely solo? Like David Bowie got famous being a solo artist. I don't know who else. I'm trying to think of course, now that I'm making a video, I can't think about it. Michael Jackson, like people who were solo artists who got popular. Could he have done that? I think that being that he was the driving force of Pink Floyd, whatever band he formed with other people probably would have been similar to what he formed with at the time Roger, Nick, and Rick. Could he have gotten famous by himself as a solo artist? The thing is, if he made a solo record in 66, 67, it probably would have been very similar to what Piper at the Gates of Dawn sounded like. Because if you look at the writing credits on that album, it's mostly just Sid. Roger wrote some stuff and there's some band stuff, but for the most part, it's mostly his music. So I think it would have been similar. And I mean, after he left the group, or left, whatever, he made a couple solo albums. They weren't anything huge. But I think that by himself, he probably would have gotten about as popular as Piper would have been. Because Piper was, wherever its popularity was. If Pink Floyd never formed, would he have been more famous? I don't know. Because admittedly, the era of Pink Floyd that got big was not Sid's era. So it's hard to say, but I think it probably would have been about the same as Piper, considering, putting everything else in. So, yes, I think probably he could have made a living out of it. Long time? No, probably not, because that sound really went away after the 60s. So, and that's the reason why he completely disappeared after like 72, 73. So that's that one. So, short answer, probably. What were the contributions of Wright and Mason? Are they the actual glue between the old and the new? Wow, that's a good question. So obviously early on, the 2 driving forces in the band were Roger and Sid. Later on, it was Roger and then Roger and David. With, Rick a little. He wrote a couple songs. Oh boy, I don't even know where to start with this one. So, to me at least, what I'm thinking is, could it have been, let's just for, logistical reasons, let's just say Roger and David, because that was the era of the band that was by far the biggest, was Roger and David fronting it. If it had been not Nick and Rick, would it be similar, the same, different? Would it even work? And I can't even say, put another drummer in. Like, say you had, I don't know, John Paul Jones playing keyboards, and you had, Neil Peart playing the drums. Would that have worked is a hard question, because then Led Zeppelin and Rush would not have been what they were. So I guess the question is, could you replace a studio session player in place of Wright and Mason? And it's an interesting question because obviously the driving forces in Pink Floyd were mostly David and Roger. So it's hard for me to say yes, because I do think if you put a session player in, it would have sounded different. Everyone's keyboards and drums sound different. Are Rick and Nick, extraordinaries who are, on the best lists ever and ever and ever? Probably usually not. Are they phenomenal? Yes, but would you see them on Rolling Stone's greatest keyboard? Okay. Maybe you would see Rick Wright, maybe. But Nick Mason seems kind of forgot about anyway. They're amazing, but were they the glue that held it together? I would actually argue probably, because even with the driving force being David and Roger for the most part, the band is only half of that. That's only half the band. Without Rick and Nick, the rhythm section of the music is gone. Yeah, you still have Roger's bass, but I mean, it's a hard question to answer. I don't know between the old and the new if that's necessarily... So if you're talking about old and new, are you talking about like from the Sid era to the Roger era to the David era? Because if that's the case, I would actually say no, because what made those eras different was Sid, Roger, and David. The reason their early stuff sounds the way it did is because Sid Barrett wrote it. The reason that their 70s stuff sounds the way it did is because Roger wrote a lot of it, Animals and stuff. The reason that Division Bell and stuff sounds that way is because David wrote it. So I would say that one really depends. That's a hard one to answer. Yes and no. What was the contribution of Gilmour as opposed to Sid's? Was he just stubborn, and rightfully so, or did he adopt Sid's soul in any way somehow? That is an amazing question. Holy crap. Let's just get into it. So Gilmour joined the band because the rest of them felt, okay, Sid isn't really performing like he could, but he wasn't. He wasn't performing well. Let's get this David Gilmour guy in, who's a friend of Sid's, who also plays the guitar. Let's get him in, and he can play live with us, you know, play the guitar parts, and we'll have Sid in the studio writing the song still. So we've still got our songwriter who's propelling us forward, but he doesn't have to perform live where it doesn't end well. Of course, that didn't really last. And there are some pictures online of the band as a five-piece. You can find pictures of the band with Sid and David in it. Eventually, they decided to let go of Sid because they basically said, Roger especially is like, okay, well, I can write songs. You know, I'm starting to write songs here. David can play guitar really well and sing really well, differently. Do we really still need Sid? And I'm sure at the time it was an easy decision. Probably, I take that back. It probably wasn't easy, but looking back on it, he was the driving force in the band. And there's a really great clip, and I really don't like to talk about this guy because he's kind of annoying, but if you look at Joe Rogan, there's a podcast clip from when he interviewed Roger Waters where Roger talks about Sid's downfall and eventual leaving the band. He wasn't fired, but he didn't exactly quit. He got pushed out. I don't think that he adopted Sid's soul, because if David had simply gotten up there and did exactly what Sid did, the music would have sounded like Piper, all of it. Granted, Roger would have taken hold, but songs like from A Momentary Lapse of Reason, like that whole era of Pink Floyd would have never happened. Probably most of the 70s stuff would have never happened. Because the stuff like Echoes and, you know, stuff off of Metal, and especially Dark Side even, that wasn't really Sid's type of stuff. So Gilmour being a blues player, I think, is what differentiated him, and his singing too was different. You know, they went from having Sid singing most of the songs to Roger singing a lot of the songs. David did some singing, but not till later on, closer to Dark Side and stuff. So his contribution, I think, absolutely, I mean, I'll be honest with you. I think that in terms of plain old contribution, David Gilmour has added the most to that band. Now, I know that's a hot take because everyone's going to disagree with me and say, what are you talking about? Roger did. I think Roger did it in a different way. Roger may have been the lyrical genius who put in all of the music, but David is what gave it life. Yes, the Sid Barrett era is magical and I love it, but it is totally different than the David Gilmour stuff. And that's why an album like A Saucer Full of Secrets is so cool, because you get both. You get this old sort of Sid sound, but you get this new sound from David. That's one of the reasons I love that album so much. And because Rick Wright wrote two of the songs. But, so I think that I think the contributions are different. Obviously, Sid's contributions in the beginning were mostly songwriting, playing whatever, whereas David started out not writing as much because he wasn't the main force in the band. Even mostly later on, Roger was. It's hard to answer that. I think that they both have good and bad. Well, bad. Let's say bad, relative. But I don't think that he just had to fill in Sid's shoes. I think he very well made a name for himself. So that's what I think about that one. How about Waters? Did he dislike Gilmour from the start because he could not fill Sid's shoes? If so, what was his personal objective? I assume he's talking about Roger. I don't think he disliked Gilmour. I think later on he did. There's a reason why the Gilmour-Waters feud is like the biggest feud in rock history. They won't speak to each other, and they haven't for decades. I don't think that he would have disliked him, and I say that because Roger literally said, you know, we were terrified when Sid lost his crap eventually because he was our main songwriter. We thought, we are so screwed without him. We can't do this without him. We're going to fail. Of course, Roger began writing songs, and he started writing. That said, you will notice the one song that he wrote on Piper, which is Take Up Thy Stethoscope and Walk, is completely different from stuff on Animals, The Wall, The Final Cut. Completely different. I think part of that is because he had Sid's influence, say like, okay, let's make a sound like this, versus what he really wanted with like the war themes and the concepts. Even on A Saucer Full of Secrets, which he wrote a good bit on, the songs are very different from Piper, but they're not like, I don't know, Wish You Were Here or, you know, Dark Side or Animals. Not like that. So I don't think he disliked Gilmour from the start. I think it was just a difference. I think he had to say, okay, there's this new guy who isn't like Sid, who has a totally different style. How can we adapt to it? Because admittedly, Waters was kind of the leader in the band for a lot of the time. After Sid left, obviously. But between like 68 or even 67 and probably 83 when Final Cut came out, Roger mostly was leading stuff. So I don't think he disliked Gilmour from the start. I think it was just probably a learning experience. I think it was a learning curve. And they went on to create good things together. I mean, Dark Side, Wish You Were Here, Obscured by Clouds, Metal, Atom Heart, Mother... Literally all of those albums, even like Ummagumma, well, not as much Ummagumma, but, you know, more even, all of those albums were them working together. So I think that it worked and it flourished very nicely once they learned how to work together. And then, of course, all hell broke loose and World War III happened between them, which I probably should do a video on what side of that argument I'm on, because I have a very particular side of what... the Waters versus Gilmour feud. I am a very strong believer in one of them. You can probably tell which one, but I should probably do a video about that too, maybe. So that one, yeah, that's a good one. I think no in the beginning. I think it was a good experience. Say Waters and Gilmour's voices portray the demonic and angelic point of views respectively. Does that make any sense? Was that the duality that made them big eventually? Obviously, Roger is the demonic and David is the angelic, which is very clear when you listen to an album like The Final Cut and then you listen to The Division Bell. Roger's themes are all about war, death, you know, countries fighting, you know, government scams, you know, big people trying to hurt little people. Gilmour stuff is all about like interpersonal relationships and, you know, dealing with people and life and things like that. So, yeah. I think it does make sense. I definitely see that. Was that the duality that made them big? I don't know. That's a hard question to answer because admittedly, objectively, the album that launched them from popular status into superstardom was Dark Side of the Moon. That is an undeniable historical fact about Pink Floyd. They were in the limelight before it with stuff like Metal, but the Dark Side catapulted them to a level of success that really very, very few musicians get to. And honestly, they never quite made it back up there. They got launched, and I could do another video about this, about how the Dark Side kind of changed the band's dynamic. They got launched into superstardom so fast that they couldn't really sustain it, which is why none of their albums after that were as successful. Yeah, The Wall was, but their next most successful album after Dark Side was The Wall, and it sold half as many copies. I think the Dark Side sold 40, 50 million copies. The Wall sold 20, 25, and then, you know, so on. So, the thing with the Dark Side is it's primarily Waters writing it, but I don't think that it's the angelic and demonic point of views. I see Dark Side very much about the struggles of mental health and, you know, the world and personal struggles and things you have to get over personally, including, you know, mental thoughts and stuff, which is exactly why the album is similar to stuff with Sid, because it, you know, songs like Brain Damage, Time, you know, Money, all of that, where it's about these personal, problems, which is funny because I mentioned Gilmour did a lot of that later on, but different aspect because he's looking at more of the positives versus the, Waters looking at it negatively. So I don't think that is what made them big eventually. I think it probably helped, especially later on once they became further apart, especially once Waters left. Once Waters left, it was clear as day what point of view you had. But I don't think it was specifically the angelic demonic thing that made them popular. Because before Darkside, for the most part, their music was just very experimental, blues, experimental from Waters, blues from Gilmour, just kind of kooky stuff. Not kooky in a bad way, just different. Atom Heart Mother, Ummagumma, more metal, bluesy, slow stoner rock, basically, is what it was. Even though I think stoner rock is easily Darkside, what most people would say. I don't know, though. I've yet to take a good trip and listen to Echoes. I'm sure that would be a fun experience. So, did it make them big? Yes, but was it what made them big eventually? I don't think so. Another thing, too. I don't think without Dark Side of the Moon, they would have ever gotten nearly that big. I think that they could have released The Wall and never... say they released every album the same, but in 73 they released Wish You Were Here, 75 was The Wall, or Animal, 77 was The Wall, so on. I believe that Pink Floyd would have been about as popular as The Who, because The Who released a concept album called Tommy, a rock opera, that was really, really popular, but that was their popularity. And they didn't get quite as big as Pink Floyd did. I think Pink Floyd had the Dark Side handicap there. So I do think that that's what put them on that level. And I think that, as much as I kind of crap on that album sometimes, which I don't, I love that album, it is responsible for that. And I think that people that hate the Dark Side, because I don't hate the Dark Side, I don't know anyone that does, reevaluate, look at the charts, see what made them big, because it wasn't more. It wasn't obscured by clouds. So, yeah. Did it make them big? Yes. Was it what made them big? I don't quite think so. Last question. What did Sid believe was his legacy when he died? Would he be proud, or did he feel like his soul had been hijacked by Gilmour all along? That's a really deep question. Well, I can't tell you what his legacy was because I'm not him and I never knew him. The problem with Sid was that after he quit music, he disappeared. No one knew what he was doing, what he was up to. He was just basically a recluse living, this hermit lifestyle of painting, gardening, and just flying under the radar. Do I think that Gilmour, that he felt like his soul had been hijacked? I don't think so. Because I think he had listened to some of the Pink Floyd stuff, and he wasn't a huge fan of the later stuff. I think when he did the studio visit when Wish You Were Here was being recorded, his reaction to Shine On You Crazy Diamond was, it sounds a bit old. So I don't think he thought his soul was stolen. I don't think he thought that his band was taken from him. I think that he had mental health struggles and probably schizophrenia to where he couldn't even continue the band if he tried to. He was struggling too much. So later on, he probably wasn't even paying attention. I don't think in 1997 his main focus was, what's Roger Waters doing today? What's David Gilmour doing today? What could I have been doing? I don't think it was that. I think it was, what store can I go buy this plant from to put in my garden? But yeah, I don't think he felt like his soul had been hijacked. I think that the spirit of Sid has haunted the band since he left, literally all the way up until The Wall, even probably the Final Cut later into the 80s. His soul is still roaming in that music. Dark Side, metal, Obscured by Clouds, Wish You Were Here, Atom Heart Mother, Ummagumma, and literally every single album, you can hear his spirit is still there, and it's still being missed by the band. It's very clear that, his spirit is still not completely laid to rest yet. So I don't know what he thought his legacy was, because remember, he was only 60 when he died. He died in 06, July of 06, from, I think it was pancreatic cancer, because Rick Wright was lung cancer, yeah. So I don't know what he thought it was. I think he probably didn't care that much, because he stepped so far out of the musical limelight that evidently he wasn't sitting out there on his high horse, I'm not going to crap on Roger Waters this whole video, but let's just say that Roger, in his ripe old age of 80, 33 or something now, isn't exactly sitting at home going, nice day today. My career was cool once. He's sitting there going, man, I had the best career out of anybody. He thinks about that stuff. I don't think Sid was. I don't think Sid woke up every day saying, oh, I am Sid Barrett and I wrote Piper at the Gates of Dawn. I don't think, or, Barrett or his solo album songs off of like Baby Lemonade and Terrapin, whatever. I don't think that he was doing that. I don't think his main focus was his past, because, and another reason, if we're going to go back to the Roger Waters interview with Joe Rogan, when Roger tried to call up Sid's family to go and visit Sid, the family reaction was no, don't come visit him. And it was because apparently he didn't like to be reminded of his past and people from his past, which is another reason why I don't think he woke up and gave a crap about his music at the end of the day. He didn't like to think about that era of his life. So therefore, I don't think he cared. I don't think he cared what his legacy was. I don't think if you asked him, what were the best times of your life? He probably wouldn't have said, oh, the year I was in Pink Floyd. Just my opinion. I don't think he would have even considered it. So that's all the questions from DKM. This has been a very long video, very fun video, and I hope everyone enjoys it. So thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, check out Isaac24.com, and if you've got other music stuff that you think I should cover, let me know. And that's going to be it. Peace.